Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Lee Kian Soon, CEO of Austral Asset Management out of Singapore. Now, Kian Soon, great to have you on the show as always.
Good to be back.
Now, Kian Soon, before we get your insights, let's first take a look at how crypto markets are performing, and then we'll take a look at how regional stock markets have performed. We start with Bitcoin, which is at above the 20,000 mark now. It's 20,298.9. It's up 4.88%. We've got Ethereum at 1,696. It's up 3.29%. Now, looking across to regional stock markets, we've got the SGX, which is up 0.84%. We've got Bursa Malaysia, which is up 0.15%. Shanghai is up 0.71%. The ASX All Ordinaries is up 0.76%. The Nikkei is up 0.57%. The Hang Seng is up a whopping 2.62%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 0.33%. So, Kian Soon, we've got a sea of green today. Tell us why.
I think it's definitely good news for Asia and a big change from what is happening over the past 2 weeks, where you perpetually have rates and are always talking about weak handovers from United States. I think this is a day where we see greens in Asia because of good news, local good news, and this is good.
Now, I think the key thing that investors noted overnight was the ECB rate hike, which was hiked up 75 basis points. Unprecedented. Tell us what that means for Asia as well.
I think ECB is reacting to the Fed because the Fed has been raising interest rate very aggressively, 2 times 75 basis point over the last few months. Over at ECB, actually, they are playing a bit of catch up. And as we know, ECB has raised a 0.5% recently, followed by a 0.75% last evening. And this is now at 1.25%. And I'm saying they're playing catch up simply because the European side, central banks have been very careful because, too rapid a rise in interest rate ultimately will grind its economy to a halt. And if you ask me, Europe is in fact facing one of the biggest crises as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war, as a result of the shortage of natural gas in the coming winters. So, it's tough times. Implications for Asia, I think you're going to see the Asian central banks reacting more or less the same way as they are also playing catch up in response to what Fed has done.
But one of the challenges they have is also balancing the domestic situation. Bank Negara, for example, in Malaysia, only raised rates overnight by 25 basis points yesterday. So obviously, there's a policy dilemma around the currency as well as then local borrowers and local business borrowers, be it individuals or businesses.
That's correct. Most of the Asian economies have recovered from COVID this year recently. And what I meant is, basically business are just reopening itself, right? From and recovering from the pandemic. And that's why, if you raise interest rate too aggressively, basically the whole economy is going to grind to a halt. And that will not be good for the economies. At the same time, I think the central banks have not much choice. Mainly because the inflation numbers in this region, even not as high as what we have witnessed in Europe or United States, the inflation numbers are also rising. So the central banks have to have a fine balance act, over the next 6 months to a year.
Now, moving on to something completely different, obviously, we note the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. But there's also a new era for the UK, which Liz Truss promises tax cuts and also measures to address energy issues for domestic consumers. Now, walk us through some of those elements there and unpack for us what the impact could be, Kian Soon.
I think it's a very challenging period for UK. After Brexit, the economy has not been performing. and then comes COVID-19, and recent energy prices have been soaring so high that it has become almost unaffordable. And not to forget, in Europe and in UK, the unions are very strong. So as a result, you get a perpetual series of hikes or protests and strikes, and therefore economy is definitely going to be impacted as a result. It's interesting that she has just announced the pack of electricity per household to be around £2,500. And that's definitely going to provide some form of relief for a lot of the low-income families. But you will see a lot of interesting behavior going forward, because by having a price cap on some families, literally a lot of families could be selling electricity to the pub next door, right? Who has to pay commercial prices. I mean, I meant this as a joke, but basically, if you have price caps on a per family, you could see very interesting consumers patterns. Yes, Liz, they have a new prime minister as well. I think her hands are full. She will be aided by a majority of more than 80 seats that Conservatives held in Parliament. She's probably going to be a caretaker until the next election. It'll be interesting to see how she could, actually implement income tax reduction, which is going to be good for most people, but at the same time, have to cope with a huge, bigger and bigger budget deficit that the country is going to experience.
Now, Kian Soon, I want to bring us closer to home now. Now, protests have started in Indonesia as the government has rolled back or is going to start rolling back the fuel subsidies. Tell us about this and the policy dilemma around the fuel subsidies.
Right. I think as a result of the rising costs, a lot of countries have actually offered fuel subsidies as a solution to help the citizens and business to cope with this energy costs that have been soaring through the roof. Unfortunately, if as we know, if you give something to people, and when you take back, you're going to get very violent reactions, right? They won't be hugging and kissing you and thank you. But if you take back some of these subsidies later, it's always easy to give, right? Yes. You're going to witness protests. And this is tough for a lot of emerging markets, because fuel remains a key component, on how people earn their daily wages, how people get to work, how people get to schools. And so once, you have a 30% rise, right, as a result of withdrawal of the subsidies in Indonesian case, people are going to be very upset, and politicians will have to pay a price, unfortunately, because protests will start, and that's what we are witnessing across different countries. And this is the era of rising energy costs, and we've seen that a lot of the emerging markets are struggling to cope. And not to forget, I think in Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia are blessed because they are, energy producers, right? There are countries that are net importers, right, of energy, like the Philippines, etc. And they are going to even face bigger challenges. And I think the government really have to be careful, about offering fuel subsidies to the citizens, because once you start giving, it's nearly impossible to take it back.
Absolutely. And I think Malaysia is an example of a country that has to roll back its fuel subsidies and is finding it very difficult to do so. Kian Soon, thanks for your insights and thanks for coming on the show.
You're most welcome.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and this is BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. The show will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It will also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.